The Things We All Carry is a podcast about first responders and their stories surrounding trauma on the job. The intention of this podcast is to raise awareness and share meaningful conversation around a subject often viewed as taboo or simply ignored. Be aware this content may be graphic and it is real. It may not be suitable for children or adults triggered by this subject matter. Welcome back to The Things We All Carry. Still find myself in October and I'm still not liking it. It's been a tough one. I've got a lot on my mind, and to include, the anniversary of my mom's death coming up next week, and about a week ago, the anniversary of a good friend of mine's death, and I'm finding that I just want to get through October. I want to survive October. At some point, I want to get to the point where I can defeat October, thrive in October. But this year it's been a survive, and I think my intros are going to reflect that. I was tempted to go back and listen to my intros from last year, but I'm just not ready. This time last year is when I switched my intros. I switched from doing these written, canned introductions of the speakers or the guests and all, and went into just speaking off the cuff. And I was worried about it because I didn't know how speaking off the cuff would come off. I didn't know if I'd be able to do it. I didn't know if it would make sense. I didn't know if I could even spit the words out in a, understandable manner or legible manner. But lo and behold, I found that I enjoyed it. It's a weird kind of pressure to sit down and just turn the camera on and start talking. And it's also a weird kind of pressure to have this podcast and a platform in the mental health sphere of either first responders, military, or any of it, just to be in that mental health sphere, and then to almost find yourself on a pedestal. Like, so if you can't maintain mental health perfectly for yourself, you start to feel like a fraud. And you hear whispers like, oh, well, he preaches this, he preaches that, but he still doesn't talk the way he's supposed to speak to a therapist, or he doesn't share everything. No, you're right. I don't, because I'm human. I'm a fucking human. And because I'm human, I will make mistakes. I not only make mistakes, but I will make bad decisions. Difference is I'm trying to learn from my decisions. And this time around, the learning is going to be born in the learning is going to be action, not words. I've done a lot of words in the past, oh, I screwed up this. I'm a bad person here. I'm the villain in the story. I don't want that anymore. I want nothing to do with that shit. I want to come to you and say, this is what I'm doing. I am talking to so-and-so. I am taking action here. I'm taking action there. So it's an action-based thing. And I think that's the big difference for me right now, is I need to take action and be accountable for me, be accountable for my actions, be accountable for my emotions and behaviors, and just step up and go, yeah, this is me. I'm a flawed individual. I'm a flawed human. I have some really good points and I have some really bad points. And sometimes people get caught up in that. So just because some of us are out here preaching mental health doesn't mean we 100% get mental health. And we're going to make mistakes. We are human. We don't deserve to be held to a higher standard. Well, and maybe we should be held to a higher standard. I don't know, but I don't think it's fair to hold individual humans to higher standards just because they have a podcast or a platform that surrounds itself with mental health. When I started this podcast, my whole goal was just to bring conversation about what we go through. We as first responders, as military, as veterans, trauma surgeons, trauma nurses, whatever it is, dispatchers. My whole goal was, let's talk about it. Let's make sure everyone knows what we're going through so we're not suffering in the dark. My goal wasn't to go out here and have a platform and go, hey, do what I do. Hey, I'm holier than thou, or I'm so much better than you, because I'm not. I am no better than anybody. And pretty much I'm probably far worse off than a lot of people. But that's just who I am. Like I said, I'm a flawed human. I'm going to try and learn from my mistakes. I'm going to try to minimize my mistakes, and I'm try to minimize damage caused by mistakes. But I'm also going to learn to live life to its fullest, and I'm going to embrace life. I'm dealing with a lot in the month of October, and I'm not asking for pity. I'm not asking for any kind of sorrow. It's just a rough month. And I've made it all too clear that it's the anniversary. It's a 1-year anniversary of my mom's death coming up next week. And it's a 2-year anniversary of a good friend of mine dying. And, there's multiple things that have happened. And I'm learning how to navigate it. I'm suddenly not a big fan of October. I can tell you that. Yeah, no, I'm not a big fan of October. So what's amazing though is that I did my intro last week and I didn't realize what I sounded like, but I kind of listened back and went, oh yeah, I was in a rough spot last week, and some friends recognized that. And stepped up, a couple messages came in. Hey, let's talk. And I never realized how much I needed to talk, and I still need to talk. And I don't mean necessarily to a therapist or what a provider, but I just need to open up to these people, to the friends, to the people that are saying, hey, I can be a help. I can lend an ear. I can listen to what you have to say. And even if that's all it is, just listen. Because God damn it, I'm telling you, just talking about it helps. I'm sitting here with tears in my eyes. Because one of the things I like to do is I like to tell myself I'm not worth it. And I hear the usual suspects out there going, listen here, you son of a bitch. I know I'm not going down that route. What I'm saying is I like to tell myself I'm not worth it. And I have to remind myself I am worth it. I am not. I'm the sum of my parts. I'm not the value of one part or another. My value is in the sum of my parts. And there are a few of those parts that need some work. There are a few of those parts that I need to examine deeply and figure out what purpose they serve for me. And then I need to find my way to grieve a few things and grieve them properly. And so those are my action items. And without action, I can't go anywhere. So those will be on the docket, so to speak. That's what I'm going to pursue in the days, weeks, months, years ahead, And it's all just to make me a better human and to improve this human experience we call life. And it doesn't just improve it for me, it improves it for anybody that is in the periphery of my life or directly in my life or touches my life or whatever it is. If I can be a better human for myself, then everyone around me gets a better version of me. And that is my ultimate goal, a better version of me. I'm not sure I'm going to put a show out next week. This is going to sound terrible. I didn't have a ton of interest in getting a show ready for this week, but I did, and this is the product of it. And I'm happy with it. I'm proud of it, but the motivation was lacking a little bit. And I think that's because it's my mind and my body, my soul telling me, hey, let's focus on you for a minute here. Don't push it. So I'm not sure I'll have a show out. If I do, it might be a compilation of my intros from last year to acknowledge and honor my mom. I'll see if I can do that. I don't know if I can listen to those, but I think it might be cathartic to do it for me, to kind of go back and revisit where I was and what I was thinking and what I was feeling, and kind of face that head on. Oh, yeah. I'm reminded of the Stephen Wilson Jr. song, and it says, "I squared dance with demons, and they stepped on my toes." I haven't slayed that beast, but I'm starting to face that beast. Yeah. So it's time for me to face that. I guess that monster that sits in front of me, and that monster is myself at times, but it's my psyche, it's my emotions, it's my trauma, either trauma I've caused or trauma I've experienced. And to deal with that and to deal with it earnestly and honestly is the best way I can live. And it's the best option. Today's topic is heavy. It's all about suicide. And it is, when you think about last week's episode talking all about trauma, and then this week's episode talking about suicide, you're like, man, I get it. I know why people would kill themselves, especially in our jobs. It's too available. And so to counteract that and to combat that, we need to fucking talk. We just fucking talk, You gotta put it out there, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And right now, it's ugly. In that internal battle in me is kind of ugly because of what all is going on. And so if I hold it in, it doesn't lead to anything good. So thankfully I have a platform like this where I can talk a little bit, and I have people now that I know are willing to listen to me and hear me out and be non-judgmental and maybe listen to some dark humor and stand toe to toe with me and say, hey, listen, motherfucker, you're going to be okay. You just have to do this. You have to do this. You have to do that. And that's where I'm at. I know I'm okay. I'm going to be okay. I've got a long road to fix some things, but I'm committed to fixing them. And I think that's the biggest difference in my life right now, is I'm committed to fixing them. I gave lip service to it a while ago, and for a while I convinced myself that I did a good job. I didn't attend to it the way I should have. And so my promise to you, myself, and everybody is that now it's time to attend to that, take some action, and become that better version of me. So stay tuned. Let's see what the fuck happens. Welcome to episode 139 of The Things We All Carry. Today is part 2 with Mike. And as I said last week, Mike is a trauma and suicide researcher, and he's a veteran of the U.S. Army, and he spent some time in Baltimore as a paramedic. I'm not going to make fun of him too much because of his comment about he'd rather be on an ambulance than a truck, but I think he knows where I stand on that. And anyway, today's portion of the show is predominantly talking about suicide, why we commit suicide, why it's so prevalent and so easy for first responders and military veterans to do so. And it's a heavy subject, but I think we lend I think the conversation we had is approachable without being too heavy. Mike's a smart dude, and I like talking to him. I enjoy his insights, and I can't wait to see kind of how we move forward with a friendship and maybe a professional relationship to see where he's going with his research and how it can be incorporated with what I do. Yeah, he's a smart dude. He had a lot of good information. And like I said, it's kind of a heavy episode, but it's really good. I think it is, it's enlightening as to why we kind of become numb to enacting acts of violence on ourselves. And that's exactly how he terms it. Act violence upon yourself. And when you think about suicide, that's exactly what it is. And like the table's set for us. And so our biggest thing is we have to ignore how well the table's set and not eat that meal. So I hope you get some stuff. I hope you get some good information from this. And as always, if you have questions or concerns or even complaints, just reach out to me. I'm easy to find, Instagram at The Things We All Carry, same thing on TikTok. And you can find me at, my email is stack@thethingsweallcarry.com. So reach out. Let me know what you think. I look forward to hearing from you. And, I may or may not be back next week. We'll see when the next new episode comes out, but stay tuned, and thank you for being out there. Thank you for supporting the show, and thank you for listening. All right, you guys get out there, do something for yourselves today. A quick reminder to please help us build a community which not only recognizes, but supports each other through the struggles and recovery. Reach out through Instagram at The Things We All Carry, or email mystory@thethingsweallcarry.com to offer support and share your story. Please remember to leave a review on iTunes and give a shout out to any first responder you know, love, or care about. Y'all enjoy the show.
Seen behind the curtain, we know how the sausage is made, opposed to somebody who's never been exposed to these things. They will panic instantly. We have been activated and acclimated towards these situations because we know they're real.
So while we can manage in a crisis that we're used to, it's not elevated in that moment, but it is elevated outside of those moments.
Correct. We can manage, like you said, we can manage crisis that we're used to, but then something obtuse happens and we don't know how to fix it. And that's what causes internal conflict, where it's fix it, do everything you can to fix it. I can't fix it. Oh no, this is bad.
Okay. And it's just very interesting to think of the dichotomy of it, though. And I guess this is where quite often we talk about as first responders, and I'm going to extrapolate that out to veterans and military as well, that we do really well when shit is falling down in front of us, but we do very poorly when we're calm and there's no chaos.
Yes. Because you're expecting something. Your fight or flight response has been damaged. Essentially, you are primed to expect things to happen. So when you're just hanging out, you're just like, oh, something's got to be wrong somewhere.
So how does all of this? Well, first of all, let's talk about this word that I know kind of bugs you, and we hear it all the time. It is, people love to say, "Oh, I'm triggered," or "that triggered somebody." What you were saying, that triggers something you want to, you kind of, maybe it's overplayed or you don't like, or it's inadequate to describe what's going on.
You're not triggered, you're activated. What's happening with your neurosystem?
What's the difference? Why?
Triggers, the word triggered is made up by, it's non-clinical. It's like the term neurodivergent. It's not a clinical term. It's a fad. It's something easy enough for the general population to understand. Like, listen, you're not fucking triggered. You're activated. I can't give me a definition of, is triggered a verb? Is it a verb? Use it as a verb. Triggered. That doesn't make sense. It's not a verb. Activated is a verb. It is something you do, because I'm not triggering you. You're just being activated by what I'm saying. I'm sure people listening to this are probably activated by me saying how stupid this is. You're being activated. There's been a lot of research done where you can be activated days out from an event that you like. So imagine you've never done public speaking before, and you're going to be speaking in front of a crowd of 200 people in 4 days. You're going to be activated. Your nervous system is going to be elevated. You're going to be on edge up to that moment, because it's like you've never done before. You don't know how it's going to go. So heightened sense of awareness, all that fun stuff. Fight or flight response is kicked in. That's why you see a lot of good public speakers. They move around on stage a lot. They don't stand behind a podium, because by moving around and being more animated, you're getting that energy pushed out. Opposed to if you stood there, you'd see their knees shaking a little bit, hands probably shaking. It's because they have that energy that needs to be expelled somehow. So to say you're triggered is a fallacy. You're activated. Your body is priming itself from what it knows. Your endocrine system is changing. Your amygdala is possibly hijacking other parts of your brain. you're fearing the worst or expecting the best. So, example, like you're just walking down the street, somebody bumps into you and you're like, hey, what the fuck? And next thing you know, they get in your face. You are now activated into a fight or flight response. And it's how you react to that situation. The thing is, you can't control your emotions. When people say control your emotions, like, hey, if you told me how to do that, I would. You can't control your
Right.
reaction either. Like in certain situations, you are not going to be able to control your reaction, but you can train yourself to understand your emotions better and in turn, how to react. It comes with practice. That's all it is.
So then we take all of this trauma, this definition of trauma, the different responses from trauma, the specification of normal, quote unquote, normal trauma versus military trauma versus first responder trauma, your fight or flight response, the activation, all of it. And how is this feeding into what that huge topic is that we're going to talk about? How is this feeding into suicide?
Fight or flight response, pain, suffering, numbness to violence, the acquired ability for suicidal ideations. It all plays in because if you get activated to such a level, it's how do I stop this? How do I stop the pain? How do I make this go away? Then you start hitting your coping mechanisms, whether it's drugs, alcohol, sex, fighting, gambling, all these unhealthy coping mechanisms come into play, and it just begins to spiral down the drain until there's something that disrupts it.
So how do you define suicide? Because that's a conversation we've had. There's a definition to suicide that isn't probably what people are thinking, correct?
Yes, because suicide's very complex to begin with. It's like the biggest question is why. But, we have different definitions of suicide, of course, like we do for trauma. Everybody has a different definition. But again, Dr. Thomas Joyner, in his work, Why People Die by Suicide and the Interpersonal Theory of Suicide, when we look at suicide and we define it, we need to understand that it's not always going to be just so cut and dry as somebody, hung themselves, shot themselves, or jumped off a bridge. And it's not necessarily an intentional action at that moment. So through my work and how I'm examining suicide, I'm saying it's the overt or covert act of self-harm or injury resulting in death. So examples of your overt actions will be commonly used methods that we know, such as firearms, jumping from high altitudes, or hanging. But then covert suicide is going to sit somewhere. And I mean, think about it. Everybody think about covert suicide. Like, how would you, if you didn't want anybody to know that, you were suicidal for one reason or another, it's going to come down to overconsumption of alcohol, substance use and abuse, self-destructive behaviors that are already listed, such as fighting, sex, gambling. And you're going to see that, there's a notable shift in the mood to the state of and the state of the individual, which is outside of their normal operating range. So, good example is, let's use fire service. You got a guy, hey, he just made lieutenant, this and that. Life's great, wife, 2 kids, white picket fence, enjoying life. But then he starts drinking more and more and more. Self-sabotaging behaviors, starts drinking more, goes out, gets absolutely hammered, and runs, then his car hits a light pole and he dies. Was that a suicide or a death because of a DUI?
Right.
Well, there was that shift in his behavior for some reason. So, that's arguably, that's a covert suicide.
So in layman's term, you can relate overt and covert to active and passive, and they're similar, not the same, obviously, but there's a preference to overt for you for overt and covert because it just explains it a little bit better than this passive versus active.
Right. I think, saying passive and active is, it leaves a little bit too vague of gray space where active suicide, okay, they shot themselves. Passive suicide, okay, they were doing drugs. Well, was that passive or was it intentional? Because, oh, they died of a drug overdose. Was it intentional though, or accidental? See, it leaves that gray area of was that accidental or was that intentional when it comes to things like
Hmm.
that. So I mean, I prefer covert and overt, but teach his own.
I think there's nuance there though that it makes sense for that overt and covert versus active and passive. I think the nuance is you can be covert and still actively kill yourself.
Exactly. Like they have come to the conclusion, I don't care for life or I want to die. And they do it through covert means. So nobody knows that they intended to cease life because, the vast majority of failed suicide attempts, the individual actually goes on to live a happy life. Yes, a precursor for suicide is a prior suicide attempt. That elevates risk. But a lot of people who attempt but survive actually get the help that they need because all of a sudden, all those support
Mm.
systems just flood them and they're able
Right.
to recover. And, there are so many stories about people who jumped from bridges or took pills and survived. And they were just like, in that moment, I knew I wanted to live. After they had initiated the lethal self harm, that's when they knew that
Hmm.
they wanted to live. So that's kind of why I prefer covert because it doesn't leave that gray area of intent, I guess.
Well, I have a theory with suicide, and I think that overt and covert makes sense because I think that as first responders, we see all these ways that people kill themselves. We respond to these calls, and we go and we kind of catalog, and we go, okay, even if we're not consciously doing it, we're cataloging. Okay, I see what he did here. I see what she did here, and man, that took some fortitude to actually carry through with that suicide. And you start gathering this weird these these general blueprints to how you would do it, and you're not really thinking, oh, I want to kill myself, but you already have the ideas of how you would.
Right. Um, you know, Now we're kind of getting down to the weeds of things because it's just like, is it an active suicidal ideation or a passive suicidal ideation? Is it a morbid ideation? What is it? Because, this is where I'll use active and passive. Active suicidal ideation. Oh, I have a plan. I'm doing this stuff. Passive, it's kind of jokingly, right? Like, oh, hey, I'm going to the gas station. You need anything? Yeah, 6 feet of rope and a wobbly stool. Like,
Yeah,
yeah, joking about it. But like,
yeah.
what's that fine line of ideation and morbid ideation or suicidal ideation? You know, the big joke when I was at Fort Bliss was, oh, if I was ever going to kill myself, here's exactly how I would do it. Like, a lot of people knew how they would do it. It's just that threshold of will they do it?
Well, and that's where everything comes into play, right? This is where those brain systems and everything that we just talked about with the trauma stuff comes into play.
Right. And, it's getting to the point of being able to enact lethal harm, especially on yourself. Like people say, oh, you know, they took the easy way out, this and that. It's like, no,
Ch-
like killing
No.
yourself is very, very hard. It's not an easy thing. It goes against everything that is ingrained in us biologically. We are built to survive, and to actively end your own life is not an easy thing.
And I think that for my journey as a firefighter, and you come in and you first see a suicide, and you sit there and you go, Jesus, or you say what you just said, they took the easy way out, or how could they do this? Or you pass judgment, and then you see another one, and then you see another one, and then you start going, oh, wait a second, this is much deeper and much more nuanced and almost understandable when you start looking into these things.
I mean, that's a hard statement when it's like, yes, this is understandable. It's, but it's the truth. It really is understandable. But the only thing is, I don't know how to put it. It's just like, yeah, I get it, you know, but
I kind of, I don't know what day I did this. I was talking to somebody, and I related it to, getting hooked on opiates. It's kind of like that, at first when I see drug overdoses and we're Narcaning people and we're reviving them, we're like, Jesus Christ, what are you doing? But then you look at the symptoms, the socioeconomic symptoms. Maybe they were recklessly given pain pills and that weren't necessary. They got hooked there, then they were taken away, and then you're finding your way to get that. You're chasing that fix, and then they end up the black tar heroin, and next thing you know, they're laying with frothy mouth and a needle in the arm, and instead of looking down on them, and you take that moment to go, okay, wait a second, how did they get to this point? Because no one just sticks a needle in their arm. They don't. You don't. That's very rare. You would just start there. So I kind of compared the two, suicide and that addiction, together, and you don't just decide you're going to kill yourself. There's such a build to it.
right. And I mean, fun thing is, if we just want to talk about addiction real quick, you can actually be addicted to being depressed.
Mm,
You can,
okay.
think about it. It's a chemical change in your
Hmm.
system. And when you are chronically or catatonically depressed, your body has now become accustomed to that. So it's harder and harder and harder to come out of that depressive state because now your body chemistry is at play.
Right. Yeah. And humans love to, we're creatures of habit, right?
Hey guys, quick break right here just to check in and thank each of you for listening to the show. Your support has been paramount, and I appreciate all of you. I have one request, though. I need you to share the show with everyone you know. Help me get the word out and spread these stories as far and as wide as we can. While you're at it, please leave a review of the show wherever you happen to listen. Feel free to reach out to me at any time to share your story, to talk, or to pass on suggestions. Let's get on with the rest of the show.
Right.
All right. So
Yeah, there's
we're passive and active versus overt and covert. And then you've mentioned a couple of times Thomas Joyner and the interpersonal theory of suicide. I'm not familiar with it. So can you kind of get into that a little bit, explain it for us and break it down?
yes. And actually, so I have this, um, correct. I'm going to pull up something. So reading, Why People Die by Suicide by Thomas Joyner, it starts out with him explaining why he started this type of research. He started researching suicide because when he was in college, his father killed himself in kind of a very rough manner. He slit his wrists, but when that didn't work, he plunged the knife directly into his heart. That's a very hard thing for a person to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
So why do people die by suicide? So his theory is there's thwarted belongingness. So essentially, humans are we need other people. We are social creatures.
Mhm.
So when there's a decrease in your social connections and support network, you don't have that person to lean on for help or support. And anybody who's ever sat alone with a glass of bourbon in a dark room knows the worst place you can be is inside your head, because um, when you reach that point of isolation, you start to feel like an outcast. You start to feel like you can't contribute, that you are no longer needed nor wanted.
Right.
So thwarted belongingness, that's what that is. And then perceived burdensomeness, which is I'm a burden on my society, on my culture. I think that this is where veterans and people who have left the first responder community, former firefighters, police officers, and EMTs, I think that this is the first thing that happens where, okay, I'm not contributing, so I'm a burden. If I reach out to this guy I served with, I'm just a burden to them because I'm not serving with them anymore and I can't support them. And that plays into thwarted belongingness as well. So I'm no longer part of that group. I can't depend on that group. Like, what am I going to do? Call this person? They're probably busy. And then he goes into acquired capability of suicide, because, the human fear of death is very powerful for us. We will avoid things that we fear can cause death. That's where, extreme heights, dark water, things where we don't know
Mhm.
and we know to pose a threat, we avoid. So how do we acquire the capability of ending our own life? His theory is your fear of death is weakened by going through physical pain. So, of course, firefighters, EMTs, police officers, and military folk go through a lot of physical pain, one way or another. You're hurt and you're sore, but you're still going. So now you have less fear of pain. And then past traumas, which can include, childhood traumas, witnessing traumatic events, suffering, loss, illness, all of that leads to the perfect cocktail for suicide. And we see these three things are present in a lot of suicides. On the military side of the house, you see people who are sexually assaulted in the military. That plays a huge role because sexual assault, now you're in this community, everybody knows, you're kind of an outcast, you're moved to a different unit, you're a burden, all of these things, they add up to that acquired capability of suicide. And yeah, that's his theory. And it's pretty well sound and proven. Numerous peer reviews on it. And then when you tie it into the book and the research by Vanderkolk, The Body Keeps the Score, you're seeing those physiological and neurological responses in people who have acquired the capability of suicide and in those who have completed it, where the body isn't as regulated as it should be. And generally, there's some kind of substance present, such as alcohol or drugs, self-medication. And that kind of goes back to thwarted belongingness, because, hey, I got nobody to call. Might as well just self-medicate. So, yeah.
You go back and we talk about the things like those childhood experiences and all of that lead up to this decision. And you look at all of that and you think, okay, we have this diminished sensitivity to pain. So we're able to accept pain. We're able to go, okay, I can hurt for a minute or we become, like you said, immune to that violence as well. And then you have the childhood experiences, which are adding into it. So all of this is for first responders, especially because, and I don't mean necessarily only first responders, but it's my expertise. We're primed for this then.
Yeah. I mean, it's
Because,
the perfect cocktail of, that's why earlier I said, I believe that, military service and being a first responder intrinsically causes trauma.
yeah, because I think the research and I only have it anecdotally, but the research about first responders and adverse childhood experiences, it points to that number is abnormally high on the regular for first responders.
Right. So,
Yeah. So here we are. I mean, it's this major thing, right? I mean, you and I talked about it. The reported number of suicides for first responders every year is roughly 100. But that's so low. I mean, it's probably double that in my opinion, just because of that whole passive and active, overt, covert, and what people want to report. And I think you were saying the same thing about what you believe the military number would be, right?
yeah, it's how we report suicides, and everything's reported low. So recent work done by the Special Operations Association of America shows it's closer to, between the active duty force and the veteran community, it's roughly 45 a day. So, and in grand total, it's 14% of the population per year. 14% of suicides per year.
And you said that was what, from 4% of the population overall?
Yeah. So we're taking this small population and it's suffering the most. And then when we look at, I just pulled this up on Psychiatric Times, when we look at, the number of first responders per year, 300 police officers, like in police officers alone, 300 per year. So now let's, tie in everybody else. And then, we look at the number or the percentage of mental health conditions developed. Roughly, I think it's 40 to 45% of all first responders are going to develop some type of mental health condition while on the job.
Mm.
So, and then the problem is we don't have, the biggest problem for first responders is you just don't have the care system in place afterwards.
Right.
So you leave the service and it's just like, hey, thank you for playing. Good luck.
Right.
That's why I have a grand idea that I'm working on right now. And actually I'm going to be in touch with Kenny about it. I think at least at the state level, if you were a first responder, hey, you are no longer a first responder. Here is, $2,400 a year reimbursable to go get behavioral health services. And that's using the model of, 24 sessions a month or 24 sessions a year, $100 an hour, or, if you have less and it costs more, but $2,400 reimbursable per year to get continued help, because at least with the military, the vast majority of suicides for veterans are within the first year of separation through the 5th year.
Yeah, that was an interesting subject that we talked about, that 3 to 5 year number, and I didn't understand it at all until you explained it. And so you're saying that you've got this first year thing, and that's a popular or number, that's a time that you see a number of suicides. But then you mentioned that 3 to 5 year, and I was thinking to myself, well, why 3 to 5? And then that makes sense from especially from the military standpoint, because now you're trying to decide what your next step is in life, and you're absent the roadmap that you were given when you were active duty or as a first responder.
Correct. Like there's no checklist for your next promotion. There's no checklist for your next qualification. It's all on you to figure out. And that's why I think after the fact, one, we need to do a better job of, when people leave the first responder community or the military, preparing them for these things. They need the ability to have continued mental health care. but also, as a community, when, hey, this guy you worked with for 5 years, he gets out or he leaves the service or whatever, stay in touch because, they're just as invested in you as they are, as you are invested in them, if that makes sense. Like, you know, last week
Mm-hmm.
I found out one of my old soldiers got his expert soldier badge. I was ecstatic. I was like, hell yeah. You know, that's what I like to see. He's still advancing his career and, we still talk a couple times a week. Um, but he's done more to help me, I think, than he realizes since I've been out, where it's, oh, okay, well, what's next? What are you doing next? And it's just like, oh, I don't know. Let's really think about what we're doing next. And lay out the plan for ourselves because, when we were, when I was in the military, when you were a firefighter, all of these things, yeah, you had somebody telling you what to do and how to do it. But at the same time, you were telling other people how to do things as well. You were developing the new people. So you were leading, and you need to think of it this way. Like, you no longer have a group of people to lead. The most important person to lead is yourself. So how do we work through all the noise to lead ourselves, where it's develop that plan by ourselves, understand what's going on with ourselves, because, we could look at the people who we led and be like, hey, are you okay? What's going on? Oh, well, I'm going through this. And yeah, we would offer advice. We would help them through it. But why can't we help ourselves through it?
Right. So that then I guess this is the point where we say, all right, that's a good point. So what can we do other than staying in touch? What can we do? How do we, we're never going to eliminate suicide in general, but we can minimize these numbers somehow, right?
Right. So, that is the $1,000,000 question there. What can we do as individuals? What can we do as a community on both sides, people who are still in and people who are out? Like, what can we do for each other? Because there seems to be a million different things that everybody says we can do. So, it'd be silly of me to suggest any one thing other than, put your pride aside, reach out for help,
Right.
offer help to others, but then think about what you can do as a person. You know, Kenny, he started Operation Yellow Tape. That's what he did. You started the podcast. That's what you're doing. I'm researching all of these things, working on publications. That's what I'm doing to, spread knowledge and awareness about things. So it kind of comes down to what the individual can do as a person, not only to maintain their state of mental and emotional well-being, but to help somebody else maintain theirs.
And so, all right. So what do you mean by that though? What is the action that one can take in it to kind of put that into work?
Pick up your phone and call somebody. Boom. Step one. Like, we all know people who, are struggling somewhere in life. Pick up the phone, call somebody, help them through what they're going through, stay in touch with them, then, work up to a bigger scale, find an organization that provides some kind, like, find a nonprofit that provides support for first responders or veterans, volunteer, go to school for it, learn more about it, get involved with the community somehow. I mean, the smallest thing from just making a phone call today to somebody could, hey, how you doing? It's been a while. Just want to check in on you, catch up. That could actually be a life-changing event for somebody.
And we also talked about meeting someone as they are. What does that mean?
In this context, it would be, so as a clinician, I'm going to meet you how you are in this moment today, right now. That is how you are right now. I know that's not who you are, but I know that's what you're feeling, how you're reacting, and you're going through something right now. I'm not going to judge you. I'm not going to force you to do anything you don't want to do. I'm going to show empathy, and I'm going to be here with you in this moment. We're going to get through it. We're going to work the problem. We're going to come up with a plan moving forward to get you to where you want to be, because nobody wants to be sad. Nobody wants to be depressed. Nobody wants to be suicidal. We're going to get through this moment. We're going to get a plan, and we're going to work to where you want to be. You need to understand. That's a big thing we need to understand too. It's like, where do they want to be?
Right.
People are like, oh, I want to be dead. Well, that's not an option. What's the second best option here?
Right.
Oh, I want to be happy. Okay, define happiness for me. What would make you happy? Okay, let's work towards that goal then.
So then that's the triage, tourniquet, and surgery you're talking about.
Right. It's pretty easy. So
it sounds pretty easy, doesn't it?
I mean, I was about to say, it's like, yeah, it's pretty easy, but caveat.
Yeah.
It's actually very difficult in reality because, and, I think that's where, like, when I said, just call somebody, I think the bigger thing is, yeah, I could go to a counselor, I could go to a therapist and all that stuff, but I'm not trying to like shit on the profession because it's my profession, but yeah, at the end of the day, they're paid to be there.
Right.
Means a little bit less than, a friend showing up for you and not being judgmental and relating to the stories. The people you surround yourself is very important when it comes to mental health. And, if you just call somebody, check in on them, and, oh, hey, I'm going through this right now. Okay, well, I'm here for you. Like, let's go. Let's work the problem. Because especially in the military communities and the first responder communities, everybody's been through more or less the same thing. So everybody can relate to it.
And I think the tricky part here is you left the military, I left the fire service, and there's a recognition that just because is a recognition that once you leave, that piece goes on. They keep rocking. They're still going to a 24-hour shift. They're still running calls. They're still getting their asses kicked on certain days. They're tired as hell on their days off. Their schedule is screwed up. You don't even have a schedule necessarily, and so for a while there, you start to wallow in this pity. It's like, oh, nobody wants to talk to me anymore. Then you realize, wait, dickhead, you're not reaching out to anybody. So this is a two-way road. So it somehow it has to be on both sides where these people, where you're reaching out, they're reaching out, and you find this middle ground that works to help everybody.
Right. Because, keep in mind, like, the relationships have changed. So, like, once you leave the fire service, once you leave the military, your relationships with people change because you're not there next to them every day. So it is a two-way street of, oh, I need help. Who can I call? But also, if somebody needs help, can they call me? And then also, oh, this person doesn't call me. Well, maybe they're working 12-hour shifts and, you used to hang out a lot, but you're not right there ready, available. And, work a 12-hour shift, go home, wife, kids, get sleep, go back to a 12-hour shift.
Yeah.
So, making time as an adult for people is difficult in reality. You have what is really important to you in your own 6-foot circle, and everything else outside of it you can address afterwards.
So I guess the moral of all of this is the same thing that we say for a lot of stuff. There's not a magic pill. There's not a panacea that's going to fix everything. You're going to have to take in bits and pieces, from talk therapy to maybe cognitive behavioral therapy to actually having these tight personal relationships, to being involved in the community, and all of that is what is probably the medicine to help lower these numbers of suicide. Is that am I on the right track here?
Yes, because I mean, when there is belongingness, you're less likely to complete suicide. When you are contributing, you're less likely to complete suicide. So you're less likely to acquire the capability to complete suicide, which it's so obtuse. And that's why the problem of suicide inside the military and first responder community is such an odd thing, because like Kenny says, there's too many of us to ever feel alone. It's like, how dare you
Yeah, but
feel like you don't belong? How dare you feel like you're a burden? Like
but if
you had
if you take that, and that makes sense. There's too many of us to feel like we're alone. But if you go back to everything we just talked about, where you're immune to that violence and you're more open to violence, and your brain systems aren't firing correctly, and you're drinking or whatever it is. I mean, you're talking about the scales and where that balance lies. And so so once it goes, it goes.
right.
And so the key here is maintaining that balance. So that the specter or the aura of suicide doesn't outweigh what you have on the other end of the scale.
Right. I mean, it's not logical at all, and that's the problem. Where
Yeah.
when suicide is the best option for you, like, that's why it's important to keep in touch with people. Assure them that you're there, because, like, okay, personal story. About a year ago, I was just like, at least I have a Benelli. It's Italian, so it'll taste good. Not like, not like Glock, nasty German food, right? Um,
I
and
don't know.
out
It
of
has some damn good
nowhere,
German food.
yeah, I mean, but
Anyway,
Oktoberfest was over. Um,
that's
so out of the blue, like, just out of nowhere, like, I don't even know why. I called this guy I went to VMI with. He was like, he he was a major in the Army, outside of my chain of command. And here's the thing: I didn't call anybody in my chain of command. I called a guy I went to college with,
right.
who outranked most of my command. He dropped everything and came over.
Right.
He took the necessary steps to make sure everything was okay, all of this stuff. And then the next day, he brings over another guy who went to VMI, which, and throughout the entire process, every day, we talked, they made sure I was okay, all of this stuff. I mean, I wasn't okay, but I was better because they were there.
Right.
And this is like this flash in the moment. Hey, call this guy. And then next thing you know, like, I'm still standing, right? And it's because of those pre-existing social connections and bonds, where it's just like, yeah, they'll do the right thing. I trust them. And I think that's part of the issue when it comes to the military, where it's like, I don't trust certain people. Another thing with first responders, I don't trust that person. And we all need to move away from that mentality of, I don't trust this person, so I'm not going to call them. I'm not going to talk to them about it. And then also we need to project that, hey, you can trust me to talk about anything. And if it's that serious, it's going to stay between us, and, that's what we can do as individuals, is convey that trust and be there and trust in others, because trust is a two-way street. Because it's fucking ridiculous that this is happening. We have a built-in support system in the military, in the first responder community. Like, what the fuck?
Right.
And the fact that it even approaches that point is insane. So I'll get off my soapbox on that.
No, but it's not a soapbox. This is what you do. Come on now. So that makes sense. So the biggest thing here is community. It's find a tribe, grow that tribe, strengthen that tribe, and keep everybody, close in hand, and make sure that you're checking in, and make sure that you're open to the check-ins when they come your way.
Right. Yeah. I mean, don't take offense to somebody asking how you are. Like, people genuinely care.
Yeah. And don't blow it off like most of us do and go, I'm all right. I'm doing okay. If you're not okay, say it. Tell them what's going on.
Yeah. Just, how are you? Been better. Okay. Well, yeah. What's going on? It's that easy.
Yeah. And people will do that. They don't just walk away when you say, I've been better. They want to know why. They want to know what's going on. And I think that's the biggest part. People, if they're asking you, people give a shit. And those are your people.
Yeah. And, we need to rethink the way that we ask for help, rethink the way we give help. And then I think everybody kind of needs to rethink the way we view trauma and suicide. Just want to touch on something. I mean, through this entire podcast, I've been saying completed suicide. Just wanted to touch on why that is. It's because, for the longest time, we've been saying commit suicide. And, I've never met somebody who commits to cancer or to heart disease. They didn't commit to killing themselves. They just wanted the pain and suffering to end. So we need to move away from saying committed suicide, because that kind of just makes it seem like, oh, yeah, they were totally committed to leaving this world.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the perfect spot. I think we'll get into those last two questions and I'll get you out of here. You good with that?
Yep. Yeah.
What's the last time you experienced a moment of awe in your life?
Yeah. I mean, depends on the situation. I don't know. I mean, and that's a weird thing, because like a lot of people probably answer that question a little bit faster, but hmm. Yeah, because I mean, now it's just getting into like, what's the elevated baseline of awe?
Now you're putting a lot of thought into it.
Yeah, because I mean, you're asking somebody to figure out what's the last moment of awe you had.
You know on that for a second. Well,
Yeah.
give me a book recommendation.
Book recommendation. I think, I mean, I can give you the ones that kind of drove some of this research, which I think would help people understand things. So, of course, Thomas Joyner, Why People Die by Suicide is a good one. Body Keeps the Score by Dr. Vanderkolk. And then the third one, easy read. It's called The Awakened Brain by Dr. Lisa Miller.
Okay.
And it actually goes over the presence of religion and spirituality as it pertains to mental health. And she shows a positive correlation between religion and spirituality as a barrier to suicide. So, take that as you will, like if you're not religious or spiritual, whatever, but it does show that, a belief in a higher authority of some sort actually acts as a barrier to suicide.
Okay. Interesting. I'll have to check that one out. All right. Now we're back to it.
Probably about a week or so ago, I was driving to Norfolk, and like I said, I like boats, and it was a little windy, nice and gusty, so choppy waves and everything. And when you think about it, the ocean, like water, is the strongest form of nature.
Right.
Like, you're not beating the ocean.
No.
You can hike that you can walk up Mount Everest, you can defeat Mount Everest, but you can't defeat a storm at sea unless you know what you're
No.
doing. So kind of the moral to that story is, the sea is no place for the inexperienced because it's so rough. So think of life that way. When storms come in to ports, they send the ships out for a reason. Ships are safer in storms than they are in ports. So take that little tidbit as you will.
All right. Well, I'll leave it there, and people can chew on that and ponder it and see where they take it.
Yep.
All right. Well, thank you very much, sir. I appreciate the conversation. I'm sure I'm going to get some questions, and we'll throw them back out there and see if we revisit something. How about that?
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man, of course. I mean, let me stop this real quick, figure out how to stop it, because this is a brand new program. It wasn't. There we go. Thanks for listening to another episode of The Things We All Carry. Head over to the website, thethingsweallcarry.com, for show notes, resources, and to sign up for the newsletter. Until next week, take care of yourselves and remember to check in on each other.